Do strong leaders matter? I think we can all agree that nations that are run by weak leaders sometimes get into lots of trouble. But sometimes when nations are run by strong leaders that don't have any moral compass, they get in more trouble. But strong leadership is still important, and moral fortitude is important. And today we're going to be in 2 Kings 11 and 12 and talk about Joash, the king. And this story is interesting because Athaliah was the mother of Ahaziah, who was killed, and she tried to rule as the mother queen by killing off all of the royal children. So she'd have no competition. But Jehosheba, which is a daughter of King Joram, hid her son Joash, and when he was 6 years old, they for 6 years. At 6 years old, there was a plan to make him the king and replace Athaliah, who apparently was a pretty poor queen mother. So the seventh year, Jehoiada was the priest of the Lord's house, not the priest of Baal, but the priest of the Lord's house. And Jehoiada wanted to get this young boy to become king at 7 years old. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Pastor Rini. Welcome to 747 Morning Inspiration. Thank you for checking in with us today. I'm outside, and my grandchildren are here with me, and my parents. Maybe a little bit loud, a little bit distracting, but it's good to have them here visiting for a little bit. Now, back to the story. So, the priest gets the guards, and behind the queen's back, splits them in thirds, 3 divisions, gets this little boy, Joash, out into the house of the Lord, protects the house of the Lord inside and out, and then anoints him king. Then it says in verse 12, then he brought out the king's son, put a crown on him, and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, long live the king. When Athaliah heard about this, it says she tore her clothes and yelled, treason, treason, but it was too late. The guards grabbed her, and she was executed outside of the house of the Lord. Now, the 7-year-old is king. Jehoiada the priest made a covenant in verse 17 between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, because they were still serving Baal and serving the golden calves in high places. And also between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down. His altars and his images they broke in pieces. And verse 20 says, so all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been put to death with the sword at the king's house. Well, now it's the period of raising up Jehoash from 7 years old and making sure that he understands that this is a house, this is a place that worships the one true God. It says in chapter 12, in the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. So he reigned until he was 47 years old. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba, and Jehoash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all his days, because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But verse 3 is a telling verse. It says, nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. The people continued to sacrifice and make offerings on the high places. So even though they tore down the house of Baal, there was still this high place, this golden calf that was worshipped by the people. And because of that, that would end up becoming a huge problem in the future. You can't serve God with only half your heart. You can't make the one true God one of many small gods. Polytheism is not acceptable to the one true God. And so, unfortunately, the king Jehoash wasn't able to take down all the idol worship of the nation. And you know how it is. One bad apple in a crate of good apples makes all the apples go bad. The good apples don't make the bad apple go good. The bad apples make the good apple go bad. Well, he does begin to make some reforms with the temple and with the priest. For 23 years, the priests were taking money from the people in order to repair the house of the Lord. And for 23 years, 0 repairs were happening. So Jehoash showed some strength by saying, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. You're not taking any more money. Priests, keep your hands off the money. And he had Jehoiada, the priest, make a big box with a hole in the top, like a piggy bank, and the people began to put that money in that chest, so the priest couldn't get their grubby little fingers on it. And then when it got full, they'd take it out. They'd hire, the king would send his secretary, his treasurer, and the treasurer would count the money, hire the laborers, do some work, pay them cash, seal it up, and wait for more money to come in. And the priests were only allowed to live on the guilt offerings, the money that was given for the guilt offerings. And that way, they no longer stole from the people. So he did some reforms. He did destroy Baal. He did stop the greasy hands of the priests from stealing God's money. And he did do some repairs in the house of the Lord. But he didn't know how to be a strong, powerful leader of a kingdom because he was afraid of his enemies. And this is one of the downfalls of sometimes of leaders. You know, they say you're so spiritually minded you know earthly good. And on the other hand, some people are so earthly minded that know spiritual good. Well, unfortunately, being raised by a priest, he was not strong as a kingdom leader with his enemies. It says in verse 17, at that time, Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it. And when Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem, Jehoash, the king of Judah, took all the sacred gifts that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, the king of Judah, had dedicated, and his own sacred gifts, and all the gold that was found in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Syria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. So when it came time to defend his kingdom, he was not strong. And because Jehoash was not strong, his people lost respect for him. He couldn't protect them from his enemies, and he gutted all the good stuff and gave it to the enemy instead of standing his ground, trusting in God, and allowing God to be the one who defends the kingdom. Because it says in verse 19, now the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? His servants arose and made a conspiracy and struck down Joash in the house of Millo on the way that goes down to Selah. It was Josachar the son of Shemiath and Jehozabad the son of Shomer, his servant, who struck him down, so that he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his place. So what do we learn from this? We learn several things. One, it is important to have spiritual training because it helps you be morally right, morally pure, morally strong, so that your walk with God allows him to bless you. But there are talents and gifts and skills and vocational necessities that we must learn to live a life here on this earth. And unfortunately, Joash was not a strong earthly leader. He did not understand that the spiritual connection to him and God would play out in God's protection against him and his enemies. He gave away all the goods of the kingdom to his enemy. The people lost respect, and he died. So it's both and. You live, as a Christian, we live in the world, but we are not of the world. We are walking through this journey. There are enemies, both physical and spiritual, that want to destroy us, and we must be able to understand and live in that balance of being a strong spiritual leader and a strong physical leader to protect our family and to protect our faith and protect our finances, protect our future, We must be living in the world, but not be of the world. That's the lesson we learned from Joash today. Even though he loved the Lord, he was not a strong leader on the earth where he lived. He could not defend himself because he was fearful of his enemies. And we can fight those battles by calling out to God, and God will give us the power and authority to fight those battles in his name. Well, hope that helps you today. I pray you have an incredible day. We'll have a special guest speaker tomorrow morning, and then I will see you Sunday as we continue our series on Are You Ready? Hit the like button before you go. Hit the like button right there. Beep. Let's see you start hitting it. Very good. Share this video with others, and let's keep going through God's Word every day. Love you all. Bye-bye.